Mirrors, reflectors of reality, or are they? They have captivated us for centuries, but some mirrors hold secrets, dark, unsettling truths. This is one such tale. Mirrors, portals to other realms? Or perhaps, something more sinister, the antique mirror. Little did she know it was a window into a nightmare. Sarah, an antique enthusiast, scoured estate sales for hidden treasures. One chilly Saturday morning she stumbled upon a local estate sale. The house was grand, filled with relics of a bygone era. As she navigated through the maze of furniture and trinkets, a glint of gold caught her eye. An ornate mirror tucked away in a dusty corner. Its wooden frame was intricately carved, depicting scenes of mythical creatures and swirling foliage. The mirror's surface was cloudy with age, yet it held a certain allure. She ran her fingers along the cold glass, feeling a strange energy pulsate beneath. Without hesitation, Sarah purchased the mirror, unaware of the darkness she was inviting into her life. The mirror found a new home, hung above the fireplace in Sarah's living room. It became the centerpiece of the room, reflecting the flickering flames and casting dancing shadows. At first Sarah reveled in its antique beauty, but slowly, subtly, something shifted. There was an odd coldness. She would catch glimpses of movement, fleeting shadows darting across the glass. One evening, as Sarah sat alone, reading by the warm glow of the fireplace, she glanced at the mirror. Her reflection stared back, but something was off. Something wasn't right with the mirror. Days turned into nights. The antique mirror stood sentinel in Sarah's living room. Its presence, once a source of pride, now weighed heavily on her mind. The unsettling events continued, each more bizarre than the last. Whispers seemed to emanate from the mirror's surface, soft, unintelligible murmurs that danced at the edge of her hearing. At first, Sarah questioned her sanity, but the whispers persisted, growing stronger, more insistent. They seemed to beckon her, to draw her closer to the mirror's depths. One night, as Sarah lay in bed, sleep evading her grasp, the whispers reached a fever pitch. Her heart raced, her breath caught in her throat. The antique mirror had transformed into a source of terror. As the days wore on, the strange occurrences intensified. Sarah began to notice a peculiar phenomenon, a subtle temporal discrepancy between her actions and their reflections. At first it was barely perceptible, a fleeting moment where her reflection seemed to lag behind, but gradually the lag became more pronounced, more deliberate. It was as if her reflection was anticipating her movements. One evening, as Sarah stood before the mirror brushing her hair, she witnessed the impossible. Her reflection reached out, its hand moving with a life of its own, and touched the glass. The mirror was not merely reflecting her image. It was something else entirely, something alien, malevolent. Driven by a desperate need to understand, Sarah delved into the mirror's history. She scoured antique books, consulted local historians, and even reached out to paranormal investigators. Her quest for answers led her to dusty libraries, forgotten archives, and the dimly lit shops of eccentric collectors. She discovered that the mirror, believed to have originated in Eastern Europe, had a long and troubled past. It had been passed down through generations, each owner experiencing strange and unsettling events. Some whispered of curses, others of a malevolent entity trapped within the glass. The mirror, once a beautiful antique, now represented a terrifying enigma, a Pandora's box that she feared she had recklessly opened. Desperate for guidance, Sarah sought out the help of an antiquarian, a woman with a reputation for her knowledge of the arcane. The woman, her eyes filled with a knowing sadness, listened patiently as Sarah recounted her experiences. When she was finished, the antiquarian spoke, her voice low and grave. "The mirror you possess," she said, her gaze fixed on Sarah's, "is not what it seems. It is a prison, a conduit to a realm beyond our understanding." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The antiquarian's words confirmed her worst fears. The entity trapped within, the Antiquarian continued, feeds on fear and despair. It grows stronger with each passing day. You must be careful, child. This is not a game you can win. Are you sure you're ready to face what awaits you? Sarah knew she had no other choice. The antique mirror, now a looming threat in Sarah's home, became an obsession. She found herself drawn to it, compelled to understand its secrets. Despite the fear that gnawed at her, she couldn't resist its allure. Sarah began to experiment, testing the limits of the reflection's mimicry. She would move slowly, deliberately, watching as her mirrored self followed suit. But there was always a delay, a fraction of a second where her reflection seemed to hesitate. The game, as she called it, became a dangerous addiction, a way to confront her fear, to assert some semblance of control. But deep down, Sarah knew she was playing with fire. The mirror was no longer simply reflecting, it was anticipating. The reflection's growing autonomy began to take a toll on Sarah's sanity. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing herself, that her identity was being slowly eroded. The line between reality and reflection blurred. At times she couldn't be sure which was real, which was the imitation. The mirror seemed to delight in tormenting her. It would distort her reflection, twisting her features into grotesque caricatures. Her once familiar face became a stranger's, mocking her, judging her. The fear that had once been a dull ache now pulsed through her veins, a constant companion. Sleep offered no escape. Sarah's dreams were haunted by visions of the mirror, its surface rippling like a disturbed pond. She'd wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the feeling of dread lingering long after the nightmare had faded. The fear was real as the cold, hard glass of the mirror that held her captive. Sarah's once vibrant life had been reduced to a shadow of its former self. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of comfort and peace, now felt oppressive, suffocating. The air hung heavy with a palpable sense of dread. The only constant was the mirror, its presence a constant reminder of the darkness that had enveloped her. She noticed a change in the mirror's reflection. It was subtle at first, but it grew more pronounced with each passing day. Her reflection seemed to grow thinner, its features sharper, its eyes hollowed out. It was as if the entity trapped within was feeding on her fear, her despair. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through Sarah. She was its prisoner, its source of sustenance. The isolation was taking its toll. Sarah found herself talking to the walls, to the shadows that danced in the corners of her apartment. Sleep was a fleeting luxury, punctuated by nightmares that left her trembling and breathless. The outside world felt like a distant memory, a place she could no longer reach. She tried to cover the mirror, to shield herself from its gaze, but it was no use. The entity within seemed to mock her efforts, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. It was as if it drew strength from her fear, her desperation. The more she struggled, the tighter its grip became. The reflection in the mirror no longer bore any resemblance to her own. Its features were sharp and angular. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. The whispers intensified, promising her oblivion, offering her a release from the torment. Just as despair threatened to consume her, Sarah remembered the Antiquarian's words. There might be a way, the woman had said, a dangerous path, but a path nonetheless. Clutching at that sliver of hope, Sarah dug through the books and notes the Antiquarian had given her. The texts were ancient, filled with cryptic symbols and warnings about the dangers of tampering with forces beyond human comprehension. But within those pages, Sarah found a glimmer of understanding, a faint outline of a ritual that might offer a way to sever the connection between herself and the entity trapped within the mirror. The ritual was complex, requiring specific ingredients and precise timing. The risks were immense, the consequences potentially dire, but Sarah knew she had no other choice. She was trapped in a nightmare, and this ritual, however dangerous, offered her the only chance of waking up. The air crackled, tension thicker than the smoke curling from the incense. Sarah, armed with ancient knowledge and a heart full of trepidation, prepared for the ritual. Every nerve ending thrummed with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. This was it, her stand against the entity. Following the Antiquarian's instructions meticulously, Sarah arranged the objects. Black candles, their flames burning an unnatural shade of blue, forged a protective circle around her. Rare herbs, their aroma both intoxicating and repellent, filled the air with an otherworldly scent. The silver bowl, polished to a blinding sheen, stood ready to reflect more than just her fear. The ritual was about to begin, and Sarah knew that her life, her very soul, hung in the balance. "I banish thee!" Sarah's voice resonated through the room, stronger than she thought possible. The air crackled and popped, the flames of the candles dancing wildly. The silver bowl hummed, vibrating with a power that sent shivers down her spine. The entity, trapped within its reflective prison, thrashed against its confines. The mirror's surface rippled, distorting Sarah's reflection, twisting it into a grotesque mockery of her former self. Grotesque faces, contorted in rage, flashed across the glass, their voices a cacophony of screams and whispers. The room grew colder, the air heavy with malevolence. "You cannot hide from me!" Sarah pressed on, her voice echoing the ancient words, her will hardening with each passing moment. The entity fought back, its power threatening to overwhelm her, but Sarah refused to back down. This was her life, her sanity at stake. She poured all her fear, all her anger into the words of the ritual. A surge of energy, pure and bright, erupted from her, colliding with the darkness emanating from the mirror. For a moment, everything went silent. The air hung heavy, the only sound the frantic beating of Sarah's heart. The flames of the candles burned steadily, their blue light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Sarah held her breath, unsure of what was happening, what would come next. Then, a crack. A hairline fracture appeared on the mirror's surface. It spread, spiderwebbing across the glass with alarming speed. A high-pitched whine, like nails on a chalkboard, pierced the silence, setting Sarah's teeth on edge. The entity, trapped for so long, raged against its impending release. The faces in the mirror contorted in agony, their screams echoing through Sarah's mind. The temperature plummeted, the air growing thick and icy cold. Sarah felt a presence, cold and menacing, pressing against her, trying to break through. But the ritual held. The circle of candles flickered but remained strong, their blue flames pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The silver bowl pulsed, its reflection a blinding beacon of light in the heart of the swirling chaos. Hope, fragile but real, bloomed in Sarah's chest. The whine intensified, becoming a deafening shriek that seemed to claw at Sarah's sanity. The crack in the mirror widened, a gaping maw from which a dark, smoky substance began to seep. It writhed and pulsated, reaching out towards Sarah with grasping tendrils of pure malevolence. Terror, primal and consuming, threatened to overwhelm Sarah. Her hand instinctively flew to her mouth, stifling a scream. The entity was almost free, its power almost tangible in its desperation. She could feel its icy claws scraping against the edges of her mind, trying to find a way in, to claim her as its own. But Sarah clung to the ritual, her voice a strained whisper against the entity's deafening roar. She refused to be its victim, not after coming this far. The candles flickered violently, threatening to extinguish, but the circle held. The silver bowl pulsed, its light a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. "You will not win," Sarah gasped, her voice ragged but filled with a newfound determination. "I banish you back to the abyss from whence you came." Her words, infused with the power of the ritual, struck the entity like a physical blow. The entity shrieked, a sound of pure rage and frustration. The smoky tendrils withdrew, as if burned, and retreated back into the mirror. The crack in the glass began to seal itself, slowly but surely, as the entity's hold on the mortal realm weakened. Sarah didn't dare breathe, didn't dare believe victory was at hand until the last vestiges of the entity were banished back to the darkness. The air crackled with residual energy, the room still deathly cold, but the oppressive pressure began to lift. As the last sliver of darkness slipped back through the mirror, the glass became whole once more. The room was plunged into an eerie silence. The candles sputtered, their blue flames dying down, leaving Sarah in near darkness. She stared at the mirror, her heart still pounding in her chest. The ritual was complete, but her reflection, it was no longer her own. The mirror, once a source of terror, now stood calm, almost serene. The flickering candlelight danced across its surface, but the chaotic energy was gone. Sarah, still trembling, hesitantly stepped closer. Her gaze fixed on the reflection that was no longer her own. It was her face, yet not quite, familiar, yet subtly altered. The eyes, once filled with fear, now held a chilling knowing. The mouth, once trembling, was now set in a serene, almost predatory smile. It was as if the entity had imprinted itself onto her reflection. "Who are you?" Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. Her hand reached out to touch the cold surface of the glass. The reflection mimicked her gesture, its fingertips brushing against hers. A jolt of icy energy shot up her arm, making her recoil. The reflection didn't move. It simply continued to stare at her, its smile unwavering. A sense of unease settled over Sarah. She had banished the entity. But at what cost? What had she unleashed in its place? Days turned into weeks. The initial relief of surviving the ritual faded. She was still trapped, not by the entity, but by its legacy. The mirror now reflected a distorted version of herself. She tried to ignore it, to cover the mirror, to avoid its gaze. But it was no use. The reflection haunted her waking hours and dreams. It felt like a part of her, yet separate. A chilling reminder of the darkness that lingered. The reflection mimicked her subtly, insidiously. It moved with a grace she didn't possess. It would smile when she felt despair. It tried to lure her into its world. Fear turned to fascination. Sarah was drawn to the mirror, seeking understanding. It was a dangerous game between curiosity and obsession. She felt the key to her freedom lay within that reflection. One night, driven by a desperate hope and a growing sense of dread, Sarah decided to confront her reflection. She lit a single candle, its flame casting long, dancing shadows across the room, and stood before the mirror. Her heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of fear against the silence. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate movement that sent chills down her spine. It didn't answer her, not with words. But in its silence, in the depths of its unwavering gaze, Sarah found her answer. It was her, or rather a part of her that had been touched, twisted by the entity's presence. A dark reflection of her deepest fears, her hidden desires. And it was trapped just as she was, in this distorted reflection of reality. "We are bound," Sarah whispered, a note of grim understanding creeping into her voice. "But I won't let you control me." She raised her chin, meeting the reflection's gaze with a newfound determination. The candlelight flickered, the shadows dancing on the walls, as if echoing her resolve. This time, Sarah wouldn't vanish, wouldn't fight. She would face her reflection, her darker self, and find a way to coexist. It was a terrifying prospect to acknowledge the darkness within, to accept it as a part of her being. But in that acceptance, Sarah realized, lay the key to her freedom. The reflection, for the first time, seemed surprised. Its smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its features. It had expected fear, resistance. But Sarah's quiet determination, her acceptance of the darkness within, was something it hadn't anticipated. The candlelight sputtered, plunging the room into darkness. Only the faintest glimmer of moonlight illuminated Sarah and her reflection. They stood there, two sides of the same coin, locked in a silent battle of wills. But in the darkness, something shifted. The fear that had haunted Sarah for so long began to recede. It was replaced by a strange sense of peace, of understanding. The reflection, no longer a threat, became a mirror once more, a reflection not of who she was but of who she could be. And in that moment Sarah knew she was finally free. The mirror remained, a fixture in Sarah's life. But the fear, the terror, had dissipated, replaced by a wary acceptance. The reflection was still there, a constant companion, but it no longer held power over her. She had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. But in that confrontation, Sarah had found a strength she never knew she possessed. The darkness, she realized, was not something to be feared, but understood. It was a part of her, just as it was a part of everything. The mirror, once a symbol of her fear, now served as a reminder of her own resilience, her capacity for growth. She had faced her demons, and in doing so, she had found a piece of herself she never knew was missing. But the question remained, what was the true nature of the entity that had been trapped within its depths? And what did its presence, its touch, leave behind? The answers, like the depths of the mirror itself, remained elusive, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved.